Mushroomhead the Devil is the brand new entry into this discography of the new metal industrial metal band. It's uh, it's an interesting one. Honestly, to me, the band kind of have been dipping and declining since the gold mine of their better sound is long gone, and even with the last few records, there's been a lot of problems in what they're going for. To me, I thought A Wonderful Life was a decent record at best because it did have a lot of variation, but comparing it to this album, there's a big decline in sound that I just don't really have any interest on that to go back into. My biggest problem stems from just the opening alone to the sounds that you get throughout the rest of the record. This isn't that interesting. I feel like the big issue is there's a lot more groove, a lot more backbone, and I feel like the members you had around the time, like J-Man, who was one of my favourite members of the band, he was just a great vocalist. Uh, Even Stitch has been quite good. I don't know. There's definitely been some great members, and I think they've just long and gone, especially with the beef with Skinny has been one of the main factors. Steve Felton, or as his real name is, uh, has kind of pushed a lot of his uh, group away, and it's gone to the point where I can just see more and more people picking up and leaving. We even had one of the newer members of Mushroomhead leave, and I think this is the last record they've worked on. But it's, come on, Skinny, what are you doing? You're already beating the dead horse of Mushroomhead. I don't think this album's quite as good as A Wonderful Life, which isn't even as good of a record either, because unlike A Wonderful Life, while that was more accessible for newer fans, it had a lot more versatility, where some of the stronger songs, like A Requiem for Tomorrow or Madness Within, stood out a lot more, being tracks that I would consider to be enjoyable enough to an extent to listen to. But then you also had your tamer tracks like Seen It All or The Heresy or Carry On, just softer stuff. But this record doesn't really bring much of that. It's less melodic, and while it tries to experiment as kind of a placeholder for the lack of a refrain that sticks out, it just either just sounds the same as we've heard, or they do an impression of Mike Patton and do a Faith No More sounding track, which is very prominent in the track Emptiness, which just entirely sounds like something I could imagine on Angel Dust, but with a little bit more of a metal twinge. As you go down to the record, it doesn't really pick up much in my opinion. It's been kind of an unfortunate release of tracks. Uninspired riffs, drums that just don't really have the energy. I mean, this is Steve Felton, who's just going on again and again. He was the core backbone to the drumming, especially being one of the only OG members left. But even now, it just feels like it's just release for a release so they can make a little bit more profit, rather than just doing it for pure passion. Because to me, this just does not really feel as enthusiastic or as groovy. I mean, people like Joey Jordison back in the early days of Slipknot, this was definitely one of the reasons why I liked some of the drummers in the new metal scene, because they absolutely kicked ass and managed to make grooves that worked great. Joey Jordison was a master, and I feel even to his entire career of All Hope Is Gone, it's worked great. And while Slipknot have never really been able to capture that, they've had different drummers. Even to me, System of a Down, John is still a great drummer and has definitely done some great contributions, but Steve Felton is the original drummer of Mushroomhead, and I think the fact that, in my opinion, he's definitely gone a lot worse is not great, especially since this is supposed to be one of the more classic new metal bands from the noughties. But I don't know, it doesn't really feel like that's even the most concerning point. It just feels like the band's run out of ideas, and Call the Devil was probably like the last attempt of really trying to bring in some attention, but it's not working. I don't think there's really anything that's worth the listen on this record, because they've already done some of this in the earlier tracks and even on records before. It's the same thing again, and I think it's just kind of a disappointment. I used to like Mushroomhead, but I just feel like even then I wasn't the biggest fan. I just liked certain tracks, and I was a big sucker for A Wonderful Life, but going back, it's definitely not as good, and I think their earlier stuff has always been the strongest. But yeah, that's my opinion on that. I'm going to have to give this one a 2 out of 5. I wanted to do it through the track list way, the normal way being structured my videos, but because a lot of it's the same, I don't want to go, this track does the same thing, this track does the same thing, and I mean it, a lot of them don't really feel refreshing. Sometimes the structure might be a bit different, but it's not enough that I would notice it, because it just sounds the same to me. It's a bit underwhelming, and I'm not really surprised either, so I hope you enjoy. Thanks so much for watching, and see you next video.